So one of the questions is when to hire an associate doctor. What is the best time to hire? And I'll share with you the most common mistake. The most common mistake the doctors make when they hire their associate doctor or want to is because they want time off. And that's a huge mistake. That is not why you hire an associate doctor. You hire an associate doctor when you statistically can hire an associate doctor. And let's go into what that is. So number one is if you're seeing at least 20 new patients more per month, because remember, the average doctor can only see about 20, no more than 25 new patients a month and process them and treat them all by themselves. And that's when they're really good. And in other words, that's when you're not losing patients. In other words, you got like a 70% prepay rate and they're staying and all that kind of stuff. That's it. You're at 20 to 25. That's it. So now if you're obviously the quicker you lose them, then the more new patients you can see, but that's not the goal. So when your statistics show that you know how to create over 50% of your new patients. So number one, you want the ability to show that you can control the market. You do not want to be in a position where you don't know how to create new patients and you don't know how to create more new patients than you personally can see. That will be a recipe for disaster if you're going to try to hire an associate doctor. So what I'm talking about is proactive new patients monthly. If you do not know how to create new patients, you'll be controlled by market forces. Or if your prepay percent is over 50%. So you want to make sure you definitely know how to keep patients. You know how to create more than you physically can. And that's through educational sales. That's what creates patients. So a worst case scenario that I put here is when you lose by hiring an associate doctor, not seeing over 20 new patients a month, your statistics show that you do not know how to create new patients. Your prepay rates are under 20%. In other words, you have not even maxed out your own ability. Because here's what's going to happen. Where's the money going to go to pay the associate doctor? It's going to be taken from your pocket. And that's why like 70% of associate doctors don't work out. So what's the best case scenario to knowing how to hire an associate doctor? Well, you've maxed out your ability to see patients. I found that to be usually around 180 to 220 patient visits a week, week in and week out. I found that when doctors know how to create new patients, they know how to keep them. I found it's usually around 180 to 220 that you can do week in and week out. Now, sometimes you can, I've spiked up before that. I used to see 100 patient visits a day, like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and that was a nightmare. I wanted nothing to do with that. So I'm talking about something you can consistently do with your energy, your focus, and still go home and have a good time with your kids, and have the energy. So your prepay rates are over 50%. You cannot train a doctor if you don't have the ability. And that's like a light bulb going off. I have doctors that want to hire an associate doctor, and they don't even have the ability to get new patients and keep them. I'm like, what are you going to teach your associate doctor? If you don't even know how, and you're the one that's going to train them, how's that going to work out? It's not. So you do have to have a certain skill level. You can't just think you're going to bring on an associate. I actually had an associate guy, a doctor, thought, well, I'll just bring on an associate doctor and he'll get new patients. I go, well, how's he going to get them if you don't even know how? And he thought it was going to work out. And then he said there was something about, I forget what it was, some kind of training or something. Well, he can learn how from something or whatever. I go, why would he work for you? If you have a doctor that knows how to get new patients, why would he work for you? See, it was almost like a disconnect. It wasn't even reality. The conversation was not even reality. And of course, that's when you get burnt, when you don't pay attention to reality. So your statistics show you can create at least 50% of your new patients from your proactive marketing systems. Now, remember, there's a difference between passive referrals and active referrals. So I'm not talking about passive referrals or advertising patients. You cannot control that. So that's not the number. The real number that shows I'll just tell you the two big numbers that show that you are really in control of your practice and you know you can do whatever you want, you can take it where you want, is number one, your prepay percentages is if it's over 50%, especially with cash patients. Cash patients are going to be the most difficult. And actually, the absolute most difficult category of patients to keep are patients, cash patients, cold call cash patients who came in with a discount. That's the absolute hardest. If you really want to check your skill level, just look at, if you did any marketing and then look at the cold call patients that you brought in from that marketing and check your prepay rates percentages for that. That really tells you your skill level. Personal injuries, not. They're going to stay for the most part anyway. So you've maxed out your ability to see patients. So the best scenario we talked about, you're seeing 100, no passive patients or advertising patients. In other words, you're controlling them. So to the two scenarios is over 50% prepay rate. That's, you want it up around at least like 70 is where you want it. And then over 50% referral rate, proactive referrals. In other words, you know how to create patients. That's the best scenario right there. And of course, that's learning patient education, and then it's learning educational sales. That's when you have the ability to create patients whenever you want, is when you know educational sales, not advertising. Advertising, there's only one rule with advertising. It's eventually not going to work. You can't control it, and eventually it's not going to work. So that's why we don't put any strength in the advertising. So what's a terrible scenario? If you're seeing under your potential patient visits. So I'll give you a classic example. Doctor seeing 120, 130 patient visits a week. Well, he's about, 50% under his potential. He's under their potential. New patients are under 20, and you don't know how to create new patients. So when you go to how many proactive new patients you have, it's under 50%. So if you're seeing 120, 130, you're under 50%, your prepay rate's under 50%, it's not going to work. And the reason it's not going to work is because the money is going to come out of your pocket to pay them. And that gets old real quick. I've seen doctors that just want to take more time off. They want an associate doctor just to take more time off. Well, where's the money coming from? If you don't have the stats and you don't have the knowledge or the skill, where's the money coming from? Well, it comes out of your pocket. So usually the doctor takes time off. He loses money, and then eventually fires the associate doctor. That's the classic chiropractic associate doctor model right there. So these are the main statistics of when you hire associate doctor. Is your prepay, first is your volume. Are you seeing more? Are you up against, your ability? Remember, you could see 300 patient visits a week or 400 if you had enough, but you'll lose them left and right. And that's not what you want to do, because most of the energy in a practice is processing new patients. And most of the highest profitability is adjusting. So you don't want to lose a lot of patients and have to bring in a lot. It takes a lot more time, energy, and cost. Overhead goes up, profitability goes down. So this is what you want to look at with your stats. Are you at least pushing your maximum ability? And usually that's 180 to 220. That's number one. And then number two, are you creating at least more than 20 or 25 new patients a month? Like I've got a doctor right now, he's seeing a little over 200 patient visits a week. And he's seeing about 27, let's see, it's about 27, about 30, 32 new patients a month. He's way past needing an associate doctor. He'll when he starts looking at his stats, he'll see that he's running them in the front door and out the back door. You just start losing them at a certain point. That's what happens. From inefficiencies, having them wait, not being as good because you're rushed, all those things start to just magnify. So I'm like, no, you've got to pull the trigger. You've got to hire an associate doctor now. I mean, because remember, you always have to have a vacuum to grow. You're not going to grow if everything's tight and everything's packed. It doesn't work that way. You always have to have a vacuum to be able to grow. So that's what you want to be pitched to. 20, make sure you're at your capacity. That's usually 180 to 220. Make sure you're seeing over 25 new patients. And even if you're not seeing 25, what's most important, do you have the knowledge and skill to create new patients? How many proactive patients did you create? And I'll sum it up with this one last example. Another doctor of mine, he was seeing about 25, 23 new patients a month, right? He was right at the borderline, but he was right up against he was saying like 180 a week. And for him, that was it for him. So what was the bad news about that? When we went and looked into his stats, he only had 17% created patients. He didn't know how to create patients. So he was getting passive referrals and, advertising and whatever. And he was doing a good job keeping them. His patient retention was good. But where's the new patients going to come from if he doesn't know how to do it? He doesn't have the ability or skill. Where's it going to come from? So if he brings on another associate doctor, who's going to help fill that doctor up? It won't happen. He'll actually lose money hiring an associate doctor now because he doesn't have the knowledge or skill. Now, this particular doctor did have the knowledge on how to keep them. He was good with patient retention, but he did not apply educational sales yet. So he has shown no ability to create more new patients than he physically could handle. And that's what I told him. I said, you're going to make a mistake if you hire an associate doctor. I said, what I would do, I would at least apply, 1, 2, or 3 educational sales systems to show that you do have the ability to create new patients. In other words, just show you have the ability. It didn't show up in his stats. So he would have been headed for disaster if he'd hired that associate doctor.